There's a reason Generation X sees the world differently, and it has nothing to do with nostalgia. Your brain was wired by experiences that no longer exist. Here's every hidden psychology that makes Gen X unlike any generation before or after. Self-reliance. You came home from school to an empty house. Key around your neck, note on the counter, snack in the fridge, instructions to stay inside until mom or dad got home from work. You were 8 years old, and this was normal. Nobody called it neglect. Nobody called child services. It was just Tuesday. Those hours alone taught you something that can't be taught in classrooms. You learned that you could handle things yourself. The stove worked if you were careful. The doors locked if you checked them. Problems got solved because you were the only one there to solve them. No adult was coming to rescue you from boredom, fear, or minor emergencies. You were the adult. At 8, this wasn't trauma. It was training. Your brain encoded a deep belief that still runs today. I can figure this out alone. While younger generations reach for their phones to ask the internet or call someone for help, your first instinct is to handle it yourself. Not because you're stubborn, because your childhood proved you could. Self-reliance isn't something you learned. It's something that was installed during those thousands of hours when no one else was home. Analog patience. You wanted to know something, a fact, a date, how something worked. You couldn't Google it because Google didn't exist. You had 3 options. Find a book, ask someone who knew, or accept not knowing. Most of the time, you just accepted not knowing. Information had friction. It required effort, time, and often a trip to the library. The card catalog, the Dewey Decimal System, flipping through actual pages hoping the index would point you somewhere useful. This friction built patience into your psychology at a structural level. You learned to tolerate not having instant answers, to sit with uncertainty, to let questions remain open for days or weeks until you happened across the answer. Today's world delivers information in milliseconds. The slightest curiosity gets resolved before the thought fully forms. But your brain was calibrated in a slower era. You don't need immediate resolution the way younger people seem to. Waiting doesn't feel like suffering. It feels normal. That analog patience shows up everywhere. In how you approach problems, how you handle delays, how you don't panic when answers aren't instant. Your brain learned that survival didn't require knowing everything immediately. Anti-fragility. You fell off your bike and the ground came up fast. Gravel embedded in your palms, blood running down your shin. You limped home expecting comfort. Your mom looked at the wound, shrugged, and said, "Wash it off, you're fine." Then she sent you back outside. This happened dozens of times across your childhood. Injuries that today would trigger emergency room visits and incident reports were handled with a wet cloth, maybe some iodine, and instructions to be more careful. You learned that hurt and damaged are different things. Pain wasn't an emergency. It was information. Your body could take impacts and recover. The world was allowed to be rough because you were built to handle rough. Psychologists now call this anti-fragility, systems that get stronger from stress rather than breaking. Your childhood was filled with small stressors, falls, fights, failures, and minor dangers that your parents didn't shield you from. Each one built resilience. Each one proved you could survive more than you thought. When life gets hard now, your psychology doesn't catastrophize. You've been trained by 1,000 small hardships to know that most things don't break you. They just hurt for a while. Mechanical intuition. Your bike chain slipped. You didn't take it to a shop. You flipped the bike upside down, got grease on your hands, and figured out how the chain connected to the gears. You learned by touching, adjusting, failing, and trying again. Nobody showed you YouTube tutorials because YouTube didn't exist. You just had the broken thing and your own willingness to mess with it until it worked. This built mechanical intuition, a felt sense of how physical things connect and function. You watched your dad under the hood of the car, learning the names of parts by proximity. Alternator, carburetor, spark plugs. You knew the smell of motor oil and the weight of a proper wrench. When the TV went fuzzy, you didn't call tech support. You smashed the side of it. You wiggled the cables. You adjusted the antenna until the picture cleared. Most problems had physical solutions if you were willing to experiment. This psychology persists. You still believe that broken things can be understood and fixed, that systems have logic you can discover through interaction. Younger generations grew up with sealed devices and error messages that say, contact support. Your generation grew up with screwdrivers and the assumption that you could figure it out yourself. Unsupervised mastery. The woods at the end of the street, the empty lot behind the shopping center, the creek that ran through the neighborhood. These were your classrooms. No adults present, no structured activities, no learning objectives, just you and your friends and hours of unscheduled time in spaces that belonged to no one. You built forts out of stolen plywood and abandoned furniture. You learned which branches could hold your weight and which would snap. You discovered the physics of ramps and jumps by crashing until you stopped crashing. Every lesson came from direct experience. Consequences were immediate teachers. This is called unsupervised mastery, the process of developing competence through self-directed exploration without adult intervention. Your brain learned that skills come from doing, not from being taught. That the world reveals its rules to those who interact with it directly. Modern children have every hour scheduled, every activity supervised, every risk preemptively managed. They're protected from the very experiences that build competence. Your brain was shaped in the opposite environment. Endless freedom to explore, experiment, fail, and master. The confidence that came from those years isn't arrogance. It's the deep knowledge that you've already figured out harder things with less help. Consequence awareness. You mouthed off at dinner. Before the sentence finished leaving your mouth, you heard the drawer open. The wooden spoon came out. The consequence was immediate, physical, and memorable. We're not here to debate whether that was right or wrong. The psychological result is what matters. Your brain formed an unshakable connection between action and consequence. Cause and effect weren't abstract concepts you learned about in school. They were physical realities you experienced in your body. This wiring persists into adulthood. You have an almost instinctive understanding that choices have costs, that behavior has outcomes, that nobody is going to protect you from the results of your own decisions. Younger generations sometimes seem shocked when actions have consequences. They expect warnings, second chances, mediation. Your psychology expects impact, swift and proportional. This makes you careful in ways others aren't. You think before acting because your childhood taught you that action triggers reaction. The buffer zone of protection that modern parenting provides didn't exist. The wall was there, and you learned not to walk into it. Boredom, creativity. Saturday afternoon, nothing on TV. Friends weren't home, no internet to scroll, no phone to check. Just you and the endless stretch of unstructured time. You were bored, completely, utterly, painfully bored. And then something happened. You started creating, a game invented from nothing. A drawing that came from nowhere, a story told to yourself, a project born from pure necessity. Boredom was the mother of your creativity because there was no other escape. Today, boredom lasts 3 seconds before a screen offers relief. The discomfort never builds to the point where creation becomes necessary. But your brain learned the full cycle. Boredom builds, discomfort peaks, then something new emerges because it has to. This is why Gen X often has hobbies, side projects, and creative outlets that younger generations seem to lack time for. Your brain was trained to fill empty space with generated content. When there's nothing to consume, you produce. That reflex was built in childhood and never left. The creative capacity that others struggle to access comes naturally to you because boredom was once your constant companion. Physical navigation. You knew your neighborhood by feel. Every shortcut through backyards, every fence that could be jumped, every dog that would chase you, and every dog that wouldn't. This knowledge lived in your body, not in a device. You navigated by landmark and memory. Turn left at the big tree. Go straight until the house with the red door. Cut through the parking lot behind the church. No GPS guided you. No blue dot showed your location. You built mental maps through direct experience. Getting lost was possible, and it happened. But getting lost also taught you to find your way, to pay attention, to remember, to build internal navigation systems that still function when technology fails. This physical relationship with space shaped your psychology. You trust your sense of direction. You notice your environment. You can operate without digital assistance because you spent your formative years doing exactly that. The world was something you moved through with your body and understood with your senses, not something mediated by a screen telling you where you were. Delayed gratification. You wanted to hear your favorite song. You couldn't stream it. You couldn't download it. You had to wait by the radio with your finger on the record button, hoping the DJ would play it. Sometimes you waited hours. Sometimes you missed it. Sometimes you caught it, but the DJ talked over the intro. This was normal. Everything operated on delay. Movies came to theaters, then VHS months later, then TV years after that. Missing something meant actually missing it. There was no on-demand, no rewind button on life, no way to access what you wanted the moment you wanted it. This built delayed gratification into your psychological architecture. Your brain adapted to wanting things and not having them immediately. The wait wasn't painful, it was expected. Anticipation became part of the pleasure. Today's instant access has removed the wait from almost everything, but your brain still carries the old calibration. You don't need everything now. You can want something and tolerate the gap between desire and fulfillment. This patience looks like discipline, but it's actually just your default setting. Social courage. You wanted to talk to your friend. You had to call their house, on the landline. Their parent might answer, probably would answer. You'd have to use your polite voice, identify yourself, explain why you were calling, and ask if your friend was available. Before you ever got to the person you wanted, you had to navigate an adult gatekeeper. This was terrifying, and you did it anyway. Every social connection required courage. Asking someone to hang out meant walking to their house and knocking on the door, not knowing if they were home or busy or wanted to see you. Rejection happened in person. Awkwardness happened in real time. There was no hiding behind text messages or DMs. Your social skills were forged in direct, unmediated interaction, where everything was high stakes because everything happened face to face. This built social courage that persists today. You can make phone calls without anxiety. You can approach strangers when necessary. You can handle awkward conversations because you've been having them since you were 7 years old. The filter that screens place between people and their interactions doesn't exist in your psychology. You learned to be social the hard way, and it made you capable. Privacy instinct. Your mistakes disappeared. The embarrassing thing you did at the party existed only in the memories of the people who witnessed it. No one recorded it. No one posted it. No screenshots circulated. Within weeks, most people forgot. You were allowed to mess up, learn, and move on without a permanent record following you forever. This created a privacy instinct that younger generations never developed. You believe at a deep level that people have a right to make mistakes without eternal documentation, that not everything needs to be shared, that some things should exist only in the moment and then fade. When you see people posting every detail of their lives online, something in you recoils, not from judgment, but from a fundamentally different understanding of what should be public and what should remain private. Your formative years happened off the record. That shaped what you believe about exposure, vulnerability, and the right to be forgotten. You protect your privacy because you remember when it was the default. Skeptical independence. You grew up watching institutions fail. Watergate showed you that presidents lie. The Challenger explosion showed you that experts get things catastrophically wrong. Divorce rates peaked and you watched families that were supposed to be permanent fall apart. The message absorbed by your developing brain was clear. Don't trust systems to protect you. Figure things out for yourself. This created skeptical independence, a default distrust of official narratives combined with confidence in your own judgment. You don't automatically believe what authorities tell you. You don't assume institutions have your best interests at heart. You verify, question, and maintain independence from groupthink. This isn't cynicism. It's pattern recognition. You watched enough promises break to know that relying on external systems is risky. The self-reliance you developed wasn't just practical. It was philosophical. You believe in yourself because you learned early that believing in others could lead to disappointment. That skepticism protects you now from manipulation, propaganda, and blind faith that burns people who never learn to question. Adaptability. You've watched the world transform multiple times within your lifetime. You remember before the internet, before cell phones, before email. You also mastered all of those technologies as they emerged. You transitioned from typewriters to computers, from Walkmans to iPods to streaming, from physical maps to GPS, from handwritten letters to instant messages. Each transition required learning, adapting, and rebuilding skills, and you did it repeatedly. This builds adaptability into your psychology. You don't assume the current way of doing things is permanent because you've already seen multiple current ways come and go. Change isn't threatening, it's familiar. Younger generations grew up digital native but have never experienced a major technological shift. Older generations often struggled with digital adoption. You sit in the middle, fluent in both analog and digital, capable of adapting to whatever comes next because adaptation is what you've always done. Work ethic. Your first job wasn't resume building, it was real. Paper routes where you woke at 5 a.m. and delivered in any weather. Fast food counters where you calculated change by hand when the register jammed. Babysitting where you were responsible for actual children with no adult backup. You were 12, 13, 14 years old, and you were working. The money was yours because you earned it. The responsibility was real because people depended on you. When you didn't show up, consequences happened. This early exposure to real work built a work ethic that isn't performative. You don't talk about hustle culture, you just work. You understand that jobs need doing and someone has to do them. You don't feel entitled to skip steps or bypass the unglamorous parts. Your psychology connects effort to outcome directly because you experienced that connection before you were old enough to drive. Work isn't an abstract concept you developed opinions about. It's something you've done since childhood. Emotional stoicism. You scraped your knee and didn't cry because crying didn't help. You felt sad and didn't talk about it because talking about feelings wasn't something anyone did. You learned to manage emotions internally because external processing wasn't offered or encouraged. Toughen up, shake it off, deal with it. These weren't cruel dismissals. They were the operating instructions of your generation. This built emotional stoicism, the capacity to experience feelings without being controlled by them, to process internally, to keep functioning even when things are hard. Modern psychology emphasizes emotional expression, and that has value. But your generation developed a different skill, the ability to compartmentalize, to set emotions aside when the situation requires focus, to not fall apart when falling apart isn't an option. This isn't repression in the unhealthy sense, it's regulation. You feel things as deeply as anyone. You just don't let feelings run the show. That ability to maintain composure under pressure didn't come from training. It came from a childhood where composure was expected and emotional expression wasn't particularly supported. Present moment awareness. When you watched your favorite show, you watched it. There was no second screen, no scrolling while viewing, no half attention. The show happened once, at a scheduled time, and if you missed it, you missed it. Attention was undivided. Experiences were singular. Your brain learned to be present because presence was required. There was no rewinding life, no pausing to check something else. What happened in front of you was the only thing happening. This built present moment awareness that feels almost impossible to access in today's fragmented attention environment. You remember what it feels like to be fully somewhere, to have an experience without documenting it, to watch something without simultaneously doing 3 other things. That capacity still exists in your psychology, even if the modern world makes it harder to access. You know what presence feels like because you lived it before distraction became the default state of human consciousness. So which of these made you realize your childhood wasn't just nostalgia, but actually built something permanent into who you are? Drop it in the comments, because the trait that resonates most probably explains more about your life than you've ever put into words. And if you want more videos that actually understand the generation everyone seems to forget exists, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.